Welcome everybody. I'd like to call to order the work session to receive a report from the Assembly's contractor, ZIG, also known as...
No, he's not an IT. Oh, he is not.
ZIG has a PowerPoint presentation for you, and we don't have anyone from IT to help us set up.
Okay, so we'll just do it this way.
We can go through it on my page. Okay.
Okay, let's start by going around the room and introducing ourselves, please.
Zig Worksession-ZCo Consulting, Managing Principal.
Hello.
Sorry.
Introductions.
Oh, I'm Patrick Fleming. I'm leaving.
No worries. Thank you.
Bill Evans, I'm on the stage.
Ellie Gray,
Tim Stamp.
Amy DeBosky.
Pete Peterson. Ernie Allett.
and can we have an introduction from everybody in the audience, please?
Linda Gibson.
Umberto Signs.
Paul Kaufman.
Anna Kartansky.
Greg Campbell.
Mike Chadwick, Eugene Gaberman, represent myself.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Barbara Jones, Municipal.
And to Diane Townsend. Okay.
Julie Collins.
Thank you very much. Okay, Zig, you have the floor. You have
You
the
ready?
floor. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for giving me the time. This is the monthly representation of my report based on observations and based on participating in meetings and interviewing folks and so forth throughout the month. And so the first page is just basically telling us that is the June report. The things we're going to talk about today are going to be the progress commentary on the project, commentary on master planning, discussion of dependencies, a discussion of project staffing, the regime transition impact, project ownership, and a review of the blueprint plan, finally closing out with conclusions. So if you go to page 3, that is just the page divider that's talking about progress. On page 4, there it is. Cool. Thank you. This is a repeat of a slide that I've been using for the last few months. It's just to show you on a high level where things stand with regard to the project. And this is what was presented last month to just kind of show us exactly where things stood. The major change I want to highlight for you, there are two that are covered in blue there. There's some replanning going on right now. And you'll notice that I have added a question mark after 10-1-15. So there's a possibility that that will get pushed out, and that would mean the realization would start a little bit later than 10-1-15. So in terms of planning the next stage, I'm repeating last month's page for you. In essence, it's the same status because after 3 weeks of planning, the team is doing some replanning now. So they're still working on planning, and therefore all of this basically applies. I just made an addition at the very bottom there that says that 10-1-15 date may slide. Okay. I think one of the good things is that the municipality, invested in SAP coming out here and doing a rather detailed, and you'll recall this, I'm sure, from February, rather detailed assessment of the project and of the plans and of the actual software and the condition it was in, the way it was designed and so forth. They generated a very extensive report, as well as they provided some guidance for what was left to do. And I think the good news here is that much of that guidance was dependent upon having a complete blueprint. That was their caveat. So that's what's happening now. In other words, we are basically going to finish that blueprint because it was draft, it was not finished, a lot of to be determineds and so forth in that blueprint back in February. So now the team is going forward and actually doing that. Ergo, the commentary that SAP had provided from a guidance perspective now is making sense. Now it is applicable. And so the team is actually bringing that into play as they go down the road. Okay, so in other words, that was an investment now that is starting to reap some benefits. So I wanted to show you at least an example of some planning that the team can do and has been doing beyond the blueprint. beyond the blueprint, taking advantage of, again, some of that SAP guidance. This is an example of the objects that have been defined or were defined as of February. Gives you an idea of, first of all, what does an object mean in SAP terminology? It's all of those items that we have up there. And there's a count there. These were all predefined at that point in time. There's some estimates. Now, I've got the word filler up there because, excuse me, because at the time when I received this, that was blank. Okay, so the estimate for doing the reports was not really ready. I have assumed a number in order to have some filler rather than a blank. Okay, so an hour's estimate can be now generated based on that blueprint. There will be some changes. There will be some changes. There's no question that there will be some deletions. There's going to be some tweaking, some adjustments in some of those objects. The new blueprint will do that. And there's probably, and this is based on some conversations with the PMs that I had this week, there's probably going to be about 20 net new items. So if you take a look at those numbers of 341, you say, okay, some are deleted, some are added, some are tweaked. I still end up with about 340, and if I have 20 net new, I may end up with 360 objects spread across there. So there's a basis now that they can start doing some planning going forward and some estimating for 2016. Okay? Last month I talked about 2 critical dependencies. This is a repeat of that page. It's to remind us that those dependencies haven't changed. They're still there. And that was the whole issue of how are we going to process SAP, what the database is going to be, what computers are we going to use. And the other one was all about time management, which some folks have used the word Chronos in the past. So we talked about those. I mean, we said, okay, there's a platform dependency, and that's what we mean by the hardware, the database, and so forth. We're kind of referring to that as a platform. What we need to recognize now, and what's been added, is that 10.1 data is getting pushed. It's getting pushed. So you can see here, again, same thing we talked about last month. 2 of the 3 items that need to be decided are done. There's still 1 left. Where are we going to process everything? Okay? Same thing with the time evaluation thing. That's also pushing the 10.1 date. All right? So let's talk about this time management project or sub-project. I think we need to recognize that there have been a lot of names for this sub-project since February or January. And there have been also a lot of shifting objectives for this project team. This whole issue about how we're going to use Chronos, we're not going to use Chronos, we're going to consolidate timekeeping. There's been a lot of that going on over the last few months, which has really made the team go through a lot of changes in terms of what they were supposed to accomplish. Same thing with organizational relationship. In the beginning, this team was called the Chronos team, and they were independent. Then they were moved under the umbrella of the Synergy team. Then they were taken away from the umbrella of the Synergy team. Quite frankly, I think they need to go back to the Synergy team. Okay? So the latest focus on that team now is just time management requirements. They're going out right now and saying, it's almost like saying we need to kind of do the precursor to a blueprint. Okay? And so that's what they're doing. Once they have that, then they're in a position to present what the various decisions are to the organization so that we can move forward. Okay? Here are the areas that are being looked at. They're going out right now and talking to all the departments to try to get information regarding these requirements. Now, conceptually, everybody thinks about time reporting and time management as being relatively straightforward. Somebody clocks in, somebody clocks out, multiply times pay rate, seems simple. It's not. And the only reason that I've put this up here is to show you that there are some significant complexities that are coming at the organization down the road. Okay? Multiple time collection systems, multiple touch points, and somehow all of this needs to eventually get to SAP because SAP will have payroll. Okay, so just letting you know that that's there. So when we start talking about interfaces, That's what that is. Okay, so here's the list of the decisions that everybody's going to have to make with regard to time management. You know, do you continue using Telestaff? Do you remove the time collection, time evaluation, and leave from Telestaff and shift it to SAP, and nauseam right on down the line? Every one of those are valid and important decisions that need to be made once you have the requirements solidified. Make sense? Okay. So there's a work plan. Project manager for this team has put together a work plan. They've laid it all out. They said, okay, we got requirements from all these major groups up here. These are the groups. You have them listed for you right there. Literally says, okay, this is how long I think it's going to take. I have a start date. I have a stop date. I have circled for you 2 dates that have an indication that why we're referring to this as a dependency.
Zig, let me interrupt you really quick, just for clarification.
Sure.
Please. Apologize. What's PFD?
I'm sorry?
PFD, time management?
Previous
is it-
page.
Previous page, I'm sorry.
Is it supposed to be
I'm
AFD?
looking for
Page
page up on this
18,
thing.
18.
Page up.
Is it supposed to be AFD and APD?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, I'm
We just
sorry.
wanted to-
It's the police department and the fire
Confirm that.
department. That's a
Thank you.
typo. I apologize.
We just wanted to confirm.
Okay.
Thank you. Please continue.
Can I go on?
Please.
Okay. So circle those 2 dates. I mean, those 2 dates don't make it. They don't make 10-1. That's the message here. I mean, this is what the team thinks they're going to have to do and how long it's going to take. Ergo, it's a dependency. Ergo, Umberto can't do the blueprint until he has that information. Okay? So clearly a dependency. The recommendation, because of the significance of this dependency, it is truly important that that team be basically under the senior manager for HCM. So it can be led, managed, guided, and so forth. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk about staffing. There is an impact that this transition is going to have on staffing in 2 specific areas, on the executive steering committee and on the functional steering committee. On the executive steering committee, more than likely, the entire committee is going to get replaced. We think you can probably skip the July meeting for that reason, and because they may not all be in place. But you certainly should have everybody in place by the August meeting, and it makes sense. Functional steering committee, probably not a lot of membership impact. But it does represent the managerial continuity for the Synergy project. That's the place that the managerial continuity exists. Okay? But we would also suggest to you that it's an excellent time to transition the sponsor to being the chairperson of that committee, which we recommended back in February. Okay? A project roster has been created. It's obviously a work in progress, but it is something that gives us a lot of information on where things are going with regard to the project and staffing. Right now that roster has 237 line items, i.e. 237 positions, people, whichever phrase you would like to use. And in essence, it becomes a projection for future positions. Okay? So what's it look like? 103 of those 237 positions are in essence identified as filled. They're specified, you have a name, you have a source, and so forth. Whether it's a contractor or whether it's a muni person, it's there. 103. To be filled are positions that are specified. They know and understand what they need to be doing, what kind of people they need. There's 101 of those. Don't know where you're going to get them yet. Okay? And we got some, general unidentified positions where we are still trying to work out the details of what that position's all about. Make sense? So that's how it looks. Well, let's take a look at how it aligns. Out of those 237 line items are people, where are they? The largest group is the finance team, referred to as FILO. The next largest, close, not quite larger, is the HR team. Okay? The third group is integration. That's the team. Remember that complexity we talked about of some of those connections? That's that group, okay? And that's the next largest group. And then post-production support, which is what's going to happen. So the team is looking forward. What's going to happen when you go live? You need to have people in place that are going to take care of this system. So it's actually not part of go live on the critical path, but you definitely need to plan on having those folks in place, and that's about 28 people. Okay? What's the source of these people? Certainly, the Muni is providing the bulk of the people. 114 is being provided by the Muni. Now, very key point down there is not resolved. Don't know yet how many of those people are full-time, how many of those people are part-time. So one of our recommendations is that you need a staffing plan. You need to know who is going to be on full-time and when, who's going to be on part-time and when. Especially, the example becomes, oh, if I have person A working on payroll and they're part of the finance team and they get pulled every 2 weeks to do payroll, you need to know that. We also, and you'll see a recommendation, we talk in terms of need to know the number of hours per person, not a percentage. We would urge you, please do not use a percentage because it doesn't work. When you start asking for 50% of a person, I guarantee you, at best you may get 2 days. You will not get 20 hours. It happens, and the history is there. That's exactly what happened 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or whatever time frame we want to talk about. Okay, after MOA, the next largest group is Peloton. They're providing 35 people. And then there's a category called to be determined, which is the next largest group. Don't know the source. We've identified the need for the resource, don't know where we're going to get them. In most cases, that's going to be contract. Okay? And then, in case you're curious, the other two major contractors, RDI has 8, and SAP has 12 in this list. Since the organization, since the Muni is the general contractor, it has to worry about the contracts. It has to worry about managing all these folks with regard to the contracts. So we have, as you know, over the last few months, we have looked at the contracts in a variety of different ways. We looked at the contracts with regard to when are people scheduled and how much time they're going to spend here and what kind of travel policies are in play. We looked at that because we were saying you needed to have consistency. We also looked at key person clauses in the contract, if you'll recall. Okay, where if you're going to have a contractor who's a project manager, you sure don't want that person disappearing without you having an opportunity to get that person replaced in a timely manner. Key person clauses. Okay? So this is now a recap of that same document that we used a couple of months ago. We've highlighted for you there are 2 new contracts. Don't have those yet. So they're blank. We don't have the information about those yet. But they're only for 1 or 2 people, so it's not significant. You'll notice that, and I would tell you that the purchasing department is actively renegotiating contracts. Actively, they're doing a great job. So the RDI contract and the SAP contract, they now have key staff clauses. Okay, that's important. And then the other thing I think we need to tell you is that purchasing is, the very first note there, it says purchasing is renegotiating all contracts to include standard MOA synergy project travel policy effective 7/1, which means it'll apply to everybody, they'll all be treated the same. That's good. You're going to get the consistency. Now, the 2 purplish lines, the only reason I've highlighted those is you'll notice that their termination dates are, one's early in July and the other one's late in July. That happens to be for Oxford is a source of a couple of your major project managers. You need to make sure that that's appropriately extended. Okay? Same thing with Parish Blessing, and that individual is also a key individual. Again, we need to make sure. Now, that may be in process. I don't know that part yet. Okay? So with regard to the regime transition, just want to make sure we're aware that you could be looking at this as an opportunity or a threat. The threat with this transition to the project, and we're talking now to the project, is that there could be a general loss of momentum or a deceleration of the project because of the transition. The opportunity is that you have the potential for revitalizing the project's governance. Okay? So, the executive sponsor, as we presumably everybody knows, is leaving. The executive sponsor will not be here beginning Friday, I believe, is the date. So that means that any kind of transition time that needs to take place, between then and when the current executive sponsor is officially gone, may not happen. It makes it difficult.
Zig, it has been happening for the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
So that is an incorrect statement.
Good. That's good to hear. Okay, so the other thing we're letting everybody know is we think that there's going to be a serious continuity problem if the organization doesn't make sure that there is an executive sponsor assigned or working on this project as quickly as possible. Okay? As quickly as possible. We recognize that that may not happen, and we're basically saying that there needs to be an interim executive sponsor right away to maintain that continuity. And I would take that further and say that as of yesterday, the Functional Steering Committee identified an interim executive sponsor. Okay? So that's good news in order to make sure we maintain that continuity. So with regard to the continuing executive sponsor, at some point in time.
Zig, can you hold the phone,
Sure.
please, Mr. Lebowski?
Kate, I was just listening to the exchange. So you're saying that there has been somebody appointed to be this, the point person, basically taking over for you?
Well, the Functional Steering Committee yesterday nominated Glenda Gibson, who's been on the
Glenda.
project for a very long time, to cover just until June 30th when the new administration takes over. So it's the 7 or 8 days that I'm on holiday. I officially leave on, my termination letter gives me July 2nd. So I'll be around, and I'm actually just gardening at home. But we wanted to be sure there was some stability for the project, so we had nominated Glenda.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue. Oh, Mr.
As long as we're stopped.
Okay, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to ask Kate, Zig was talking about the need to extend the contracts as Oxford and Parrish. Do we have funding
One
for
of
that?
the
Did we approve
challenges
that?
is that we do not get to see these before Zig sees them, and I don't get to see his presentation or go over it with him. So he gathers the best information he can in a short period of time. But because I don't talk to him in detail about this before, a lot of the information you're getting up there may not actually reflect the activity that's going on at the CFO level. So we have these contracts, discussions are underway, and things are always moving. But it's very good for him to put it up there, but it's not always reflective of what's actually going on.
Yeah, like I said, I have no way of knowing if these things are being negotiated
Well, he does.
currently,
He would come talk
but
to
I will tell you
sponsor.
that chart was reviewed by purchasing.
Well, we'll just have to work on changing
Okay.
things. You can continue. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the ongoing executive sponsor, we just have some suggestions. I think, we're basically saying that that executive sponsor needs to be a person who understands large projects, okay? That, going forward, that executive sponsor, in our opinion, needs to be the chair of the Functional Steering Committee, that executive sponsor should continue to report to the Executive Committee and the IT Committee as well as the Assembly. And we just want to know, just from a definitions perspective as we go down the road in terms of terminology, realize that the Functional Steering Committee has renamed the executive sponsor to program sponsor. Okay? Who should own the project? We want to talk a little bit about the fact who the general contractor is for this project. The history, I think we all know. We've had Black & Veatch was a systems integrator, i.e. kind of the owner, if you will, the general contractor. And then Peloton became one. Neither one of those two were successful, otherwise we wouldn't be here where we are today. Today, the city, the UNI is the general contractor. We have multiple contracts for all time materials. And, in essence, MOA is the general contractor. So what is our recommendation? We think you should continue with this program sponsor as the general contractor for the blueprint stage of work. You need to maintain momentum and continuity. Okay? Needs to happen, got to keep going. Now, once you finish the blueprint, once you have a finalized design, sure, you can consider and think about the possibility of bringing in a systems integrator or another general contractor again. And the reason why it makes some sense there is because, in essence, the design is we think it needs to be a frozen, locked-in document. No more changes unless there's an exception. No more changes unless somebody can come up with a good reason. Otherwise, you're going to go with what you've got, which means that now your general contractor and your systems integrator has got something to work with that is finite and specific. Make sense? So that's where we think you ought to do it. We need to forewarn you that a systems integrator will start requesting all kinds of guarantees. I can tell you they will, given the history, they will say the Muni has got to guarantee its internal people to be there on time, full time. That's going to happen, because that's exactly the reason why those other two systems integrators have indicated there was failure. Okay, but they need to take on the responsibility for the subcontracts too. Okay, so all of a sudden the independent contractors like Oxford needs to be a subcontractor to the general. That's the only way they can have control over what's going on. Okay, and then you're going to have to pay them extra for all those services. We also are suggesting if you're planning to outsource to a systems integrator, you need to start this stuff early. I mean, I think Kate can probably attest to this. Negotiating a contract with SAP takes months. It does. Just takes months. There is a reason why I basically used this graphic. It is because we are in this replanning mode on Blueprint. Okay. So, let's talk a little bit about some observations on the planning thing. The detailed task list that is in the actual plan follows the ASAP methodology. It's a good thing. Okay. There are currently 805 line items in the plan. That will grow. That will grow. As an example, when you start talking about some of the downline activities, we're probably going to end up doubling the number of tasks because we need to identify FILO tasks and HCM tasks. Okay, so we're going to probably end up doubling those generic tasks. The upcoming blueprint stage of work has 344 line items, which are planned, and that was done in the past 3 weeks. And when I say planned, that means that somebody has established a duration, hours, resources, and schedule. It's in there. Okay? I do think it's important to know we've got the tasks for the rest of the plan, but there are no duration, no schedule, no hours, none of that's there, okay? No resources. 62 of the 85 line items are for activities that go beyond go live. Remember we were talking about production support, those 28 people, that's sitting out there, and those are things that they're going to be doing, but that's now in the critical path to get to go live. So blueprinting is underway and it's continuing, even though there's some replanning going on. All right? The plan doesn't, I mentioned it a month ago, I'll say it again, it does not reflect the dependency which must be considered for time management requirements. I am urging the team to include that dependency. Okay? And then I would also suggest that, and this is a good thing. There's some ideas came out about the way we're doing the design decisions on both FILO and HCM, and it's working, and it's going to reduce some of the effort going forward. So that's a good thing. Okay. So let's take a look at the plan real quick. I don't intend to bury you in detail, just wanted to highlight some things for you. This is the plan. It's actually a Microsoft project, and I've highlighted a few things for you. You see as-built documentation, quality assurance, as-built documentation, consolidation, update, and sign-off, and then to-be blueprint. The reason why those things are there and they're highlighted is that there's some replanning going on. And because of that replanning, some of these items in here are not planned. I mean, in other words, they're shown as 0 hours. Okay? Needs to be in there. Now, some of those plans exist, but again, folks are being a little nervous, a little reticent to put that stuff in there because they're replanning. All right? Now, you see a lot of question marks in that column under duration. That's Microsoft project. If you don't put anything in there for duration, it will default to 1 day, and it will put a question mark in there. So buried in all those 344 line items that are summarized here, there are some line items that have just a default of 1 day. Needs some work. Needs some work. Okay? Needs some work. The 28,000 hours is a very reasonable guideline of how many hours are going to be expended to complete blueprint. However, I've already told you some of them have got 0 in there right now. So that will move up. That will increase, because anything more than 0 will make that number go up. Now, I highlighted 331 because that got my attention. I'm going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought our target was 10.1. And I found a line item that was misplaced. Okay, and it was misplaced and it pushed that date out. That's been corrected. All right, I just didn't have a chance to change it on here for you. Okay? As far as looking forward and going forward, every week you get a copy of this, and just kind of repeating this and letting you know that we're still tracking the weekly rate. And as you look forward, and as you start looking at durations, and as you start seeing schedules, these are numbers that you can start using if you want to get some feel for what's going to be spent over the next year. Now, that $150,000 per week for contractors will rise. People are being added as we speak. People are being added as we speak. Right now, that represents 32 contractors. Okay? That number will rise. But it is something that, it's also a reminder to all of us, the more we delay and defer, we keep chunking away at $150,000 a week. Okay? So what are some of our conclusions? You need a program sponsor. I'm using the FSC's term ASAP. The team needs to keep moving. We just talked about the run rate. The old time management requirements team needs to report to the HCM senior manager. I'm giving you more load, Umberto. The project planning needs to view the project from a FILO and HCM perspective. You need to make sure you start breaking those apart. You need to break apart those generic aspects. The other thing I think what needs to happen is, down that last sentence is, there's nothing stopping us from identifying dependencies on those project plans going out in the future. They're not there, but they need to be there. Okay? That's the first point here. We need a staffing plan. I talked about that. Change management is crucial to the success of this. Again, some history back in the observations we had in January, February. We had an awful lot of super users that weren't informed. They were not really pro project. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. The only way you can fix that is to start early and sell. Okay, and that's your change management team. They need to have commitment and support from the executives as you go forward. Okay. So the bottom line, the team has successfully completed its plan over the past 4 months. Whatever they were tasked to do, they did. That's a good thing. I think the team needs to stop tweaking the plan, charge ahead. From a positioning perspective and a planning and outlook perspective, I think it's wonderful that they're starting to use the SAP guidance. All right? And I do think that the Muni needs to start recognizing that when that blueprint is finished, it needs to commit to say that that blueprint is there and it's locked down. Okay? Assuming the blueprint completes by the end of 2015. Now, you'll notice I was a little shady there. It didn't say 10-1. But assuming it completes by the end of 2015, if you look at SAP's guidance and all those detailed numbers, which we looked at back in February, I think that Philo and HCM can complete by the end of 2017.
I hope you're talking about.
2016, I'm sorry. Whoa!
My heart stopped for half
Your heart's
a
like,
second.
sorry about it. No, definitely I mean 2016. Okay, any questions?
Any questions? No? Ms. Guard, do you want to make any comments?
I just want to go back to the slide with the 100 people that we didn't identify, because that was a surprise to me, that there are 100 people that we haven't identified. And I just wonder if those are people who are testing or part of the change champions, but not the core team. So I just wondered if that would be something.
To my knowledge, the roster that I was given was the team. In other words, it's not champions or super users, it's not any.
We don't have 234 people on the team. So
Well,
I
this
just
is-
need
this
to
is
get
including-
clarification of that.
This is including a lot of part-timers.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's also whatever you need for the rest of the project. I mean, so,
we're
I can
in-
only go with what was given to me. I mean,
So, there's a time horizon perhaps. The blueprint team has been pretty well identified. So I wouldn't want you to leave with the anticipation that we don't have all these resources identified for what we need to do this summer. When we get into 2016, I'm quite sure they don't have names of all the people who are going to be testing, and that may be the roster that he was given. So perhaps in the future, it would avoid challenges like this if in the morning, Zig went over this presentation with whoever the program sponsor is going to be, so that there's not a feeling that you're getting information that might not be complete or accurate. It's such an important role. We want it to be as accurate as possible.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay. Work session is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.